Hi everyone, this is Ricky Spencer, and welcome to another of our Sociology of Media Voices series. And today we've got an incredible human being by the name of Andrew Staite. And I have known of Andrew Staite's fabulous space that he created many years ago called the Pinnacle Foundation. And we're going to learn about the importance of the Pinnacle Foundation, why it's something that I believe all researchers throughout Australia need to be aware, so that you can support your young students coming through the systems to want to become our future leaders in Australian society, how they can gain the support and networking connections so that they can build community capacity for everybody. So, welcome, Andrew, to our web podcast series today.
Thank you so much, Ricky. Thank you for making me so welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. So let's start the journey, Andrew. So let's start first. Let us. Who is Andrew State?
Mhm. It's a great question. I'm a cisgendered gay man who grew up in an outer suburb of Melbourne in the 1970s and 1980s and had a difficult journey through school. Was bullied and, sort of the school wasn't great for me. And I was very fortunate that I had the support of my parents to study. They always encouraged me to study, and I very much saw education as my ticket away from the childhood that I'd had. I didn't tell my parents I was gay until I was in my 20s because I was fearful of their rejection if they found out that I was gay. But it was nevertheless a very challenging journey, and I think it influenced a lot of what I subsequently then went on and did. So I studied law at
Mm,
Melbourne Uni. I did my articles at one of the big law firms that at that stage was very unwelcoming in many senses, and I went into the closet again, and then had a brief stint working in the arts, and then worked in the recruitment industry for quite a lot of years, including starting a business. And I became aware of the Pinnacle Foundation in 2016. Paul Zara, who was the then chair of the Pinnacle Foundation, had been an ambassador for Midsummer, of which I've been on the board for some years. And Paul said when I stepped off the Midsummer board, would I think about getting involved with Pinnacle? And he explained what Pinnacle did, which was basically to award scholarships to young LGBTQIA plus Australians, typically who face into family, faith, and or community rejection because of how they identify, and supports them to study in their chosen discipline at university or full-time TAFE for the duration of their studies. And additionally, every scholarship recipient also receives a carefully matched mentor who's walked their path. So someone who will share the same gender and sexual identity, and who works at a more progressed field in the same field that the scholar is studying, and who can become a role model, and wise counsel and an advocate for the young person, and also someone who can provide hope. Because if you've been told growing up that you'll amount to nothing or you'll live a loveless life, or all the terrible things which still get said to young people in our community, um, that mentor who's walked the path is very, very important. So I got involved with Pinnacle back in 2016, and on the board, and let it fill a lot of my time. I'd sold my stake in a business. I had more time to give. And then in 2019, the board said, would I lead the foundation and help grow the foundation? So the foundation's over trebled in size since 2019, which is wonderful. And it's thanks to the support of so many people across the country who volunteer their time. And Ricky, I know you've volunteered your time as a mentor to the foundation. And so we are very, very fortunate to be supporting well over 100 scholars nationally at this point, in their studies. And we also, there's a third element that I should touch on with the Pinnacle program, and that's really what we term the Pinnacle family. And we use that term advisedly, as many of the scholars will talk about their Pinnacle family, typically, or especially those who face family rejection of their own
mm,
blood families, to have them talk about their Pinnacle family, and that comprises the people who volunteer their time, the mentors, the committee members in whatever location it is around the country, and our donors and partners and supporters who come together as this Pinnacle family to give scholars support and show them there is a community around them, and also to help them with pathways into employment when they finish their studies. So the program is one which has continued to not only grow, but also to deepen, I think, in terms of its impact, as we've seen many of the Pinnacle alumni either volunteer their time back, particularly those who went through the program some years ago and now getting to a stage in their own careers where they can actually now be the mentors for young people coming through, which is wonderful, or volunteer their time as members of committees or getting involved as donors to the foundation. So to give you just the history, Pinnacle was actually started back in 2007 by Sean Linkson and his now husband, Philip Comans. They were in the US on a holiday, and they had met with some friends who said they supported what is the equivalent Pinnacle charity in the US, and they thought, what a wonderful idea. We'll look to get involved and volunteer some time in the local charity in Australia when we get back, and there wasn't one. So with two of their other friends, they founded Pinnacle in 2007, and it took them until 2010 to raise enough funds to support the first scholarships. And the foundation and Sean, and in fact all the founders, are still very actively involved with Pinnacle, which is really wonderful. And I think, certainly for Sean and for Philip and Susan and Paul, they very much are thrilled to see how the foundations continue to evolve and develop over the years, because the need is there and the need remains very, very great. There's a perception, I think, particularly in inner city areas, that since marriage equality was achieved in 2017, that things are done and we don't need to worry anymore. But as I know you're aware, the rates of self-harm and suicide among particularly young members, in fact, at all levels of our community, remains extremely elevated. In some ways, some of the recent research suggests it may even be getting worse. So that sense of importance of community and support to help people take a sustainable pathway into a productive part of society and being able to make a contribution back to society is something that the Pinnacle Foundation has really strived to deliver over many years.
Andrew, like myself growing up similar to you in the 70s and 80s, and then working in the 90s onwards, one of the things that people like myself in that era struggled with is having connection and building professional relationships ongoing, because in that period of time, I could see when I was still presenting as a male, cis male at that stage, gay male, but hiding my sexuality. The conversations seemed to be focused around family and involved what people did on the weekends, and it was sort of around football. It was a very male, and it probably still is male-oriented heteronormative system. So, Andrew, how does the Pinnacle Foundation work to support our diverse community, to
Yes.
make them feel okay about themselves in workplaces?
That's a great question, and it sort of really links very squarely into our theory of change. And probably, I think, increasingly, the biggest impact that we're actually having is now not only the support of, the 100 and something scholars that we're supporting nationally now, who will hopefully all go on to be leaders and role models and advocates in their own right, but a big element of the Pinnacle program is we rely increasingly on corporate support. We're not government funded, and we are very fortunate to have many corporates who see the value of supporting young people in our community to secure an education. There was some very powerful research conducted by the Mitchell Institute, part of Victoria University, back in 2017, counting the cost of lost opportunities in Australian education. And that report looked at the economic as well as the social impacts of young people not seeing through their studies, and looked at things like what were the biggest influences of people not completing an education. And the biggest things were severe peer victimisation, family disruption, homelessness, those sorts of things. And after the Indigenous community, our community was the most disadvantaged. So we use that information when we share that with many of our corporate partners. They want to support the program. In return for their support, and what we do is, where it's safe for them to do so, we encourage our scholars and our alumni to go into those corporate contexts to share their journeys, to share their stories, and in ways which aren't, always tied around days of significance. We do those things, but also trying to embed within those corporates the voices of our community, and in a way which causes, particularly, we hope, parents who might be listening to reflect on what would they do if that was their child. If you hear a young person sharing a story of rejection because of either identity or sexuality, it's almost a universal thing that it causes people to think and to reflect. And we know that if young people have the support of their parents as they do go on their journey to who they are, then they are in a much safer place. So through the program, while we take funds from our corporate partners, in return, we try, and where it's safe for scholars to do so, have scholars and alumni go along and share stories. And it's, the feedback is so powerful, because we'll get people who otherwise would just sort of sail through life, maybe avoiding any contact with our community, getting them to stop and think, and to reflect on prejudice, reflect on bias, and to really think a little bit more about the importance of creating respectful environments where everyone can feel that they belong, and be treated equally within those sort of workplace environments. And obviously, in the current context, there's now an overlay of respect at work laws, which have strengthened over the last year, which really put a more active obligation on employers to make sure they are creating safe workplaces, and psychologically safe workplaces for people as well. So that is very much a big element of how we try to bring about change, but also through that process to connect the scholars and the alumni into employment opportunities. Having said all of that, there is still one gap that we had seen that we felt we weren't covering fast enough, and that was looking at the number of senior voices in the LGBTQIA+ community across government and business and community, and seeing that there are still not enough of our voices being heard at the top levels. And so a big part of that was looking at, well, what more could we do? And there was a program that I think you're familiar with, that Stanford was running, or runs, in the US, an LGBT fellowship targeting mid to senior level people who want to go to the top levels of leadership within whatever their constituency is. And the cost to do that program, when you put in exchange rates and things and travel to the US, comes out well into the $25,000+, which is inaccessible. So we started some dialogue some years ago now, and formed an alliance with the University of Sydney Business School to deliver the LGBTQIA+ Executive Fellowship, which is the first program of its kind to run in the Asia Pacific region, and really does target mid to senior level people in our community for a week-long intensive leadership development program that leans into queer leadership and gives people a sense as to how you can be authentic to yourself, but then lead in a way that brings people on a journey and is comfortable with your own identity. And that program ran for the first time in September of last year, and for the first program of its kind, it rated, I think it was 95% satisfaction, or not satisfaction, rated it excellent. So that was something that the business school said was almost unheard of. The program runs again the 3rd to the 7th of June this year. And we our contribution to the program is very much we help to sort of inform the content. The program is delivered by the professors from the business school, but we also bring some keynote speakers. So at this fellowship, Michael Kirby will speak at the dinner, at the welcome dinner on the first evening. Anna Brown will make, the CEO of Equality Australia, will present to the cohort on how she goes about leadership. Paul Zara will do the same. Alan Joyce, obviously, who's been on a sort of journey, but has been one of the most senior leaders in our community, will, I think, also be presenting in being quizzed around his leadership, which will be a fascinating session, I'm sure. And there'll be a session with Meg O'Neill, who's the CEO of Woodside, so the most senior sort of business person within our community. And Sally Ord will be the speaker at the graduation dinner on the Friday evening. So that program is one. It does come with a fee. So the cost for that program is $9,000 plus GST, which goes to the university. However, if the program makes any profit, then the university shares 50% of that profit back with Pinnacle to invest in its core scholarships program for young LGBT people who face, the challenges that they have. So it really fulfills a separate role to try and accelerate the leadership of people already on that journey within our community, but who want to go that next step. So there are still some places available for the June program. The cohort size is limited to between 25 and 30, and I think there's about 8 or so places left in that program. So if there is anyone listening, I would encourage them to, Google LGBTQIA plus executive fellowship, and if they're interested, apply sooner rather than later, as those places will fill. And I went through the program the first time personally. I funded myself to go on the program, and it was a very funny first day session when the university and I got up to welcome everyone. And I said, look, I'm welcoming you, but then I'm going back to sit over there, and my seat very much for the rest of the week is as a participant, not as sort of the representative of Pinnacle. And it was an incredibly powerful program, and it really, the connections fostered between the people on the program were just incredible, but also the reflections on leadership and watching the different people going through the program, having different experiences. And one that resonates for me was, there was a woman on the program who is quite senior and had said reflected at the end of the second day that she'd been on many sort of programs for executive development over her time, including being sent overseas on programs. And she reflected that if by the end of the first day, a straight man hadn't come up to her and sort of said with a snigger, what's your husband doing while you're away? Ha ha ha, style of thing. And then she said that each time that would happen, immediately those barriers go up, and then you have to start to think, I'm on guard for the rest of the program. And she said, I have not felt any sense of that threat. And then she paused and said, this is what it must feel like to be straight. And I thought that was so profound, that, we're so used to having to have that barrier just ready to go up at any given time. So having that safe place to learn, and it was an intense program. There were project assignments that you work on in teams across the course of the week. So there are some late nights and stress as you work on presentations, all very relevant to the subject matter. But it was a wonderful program, and I think an important addition to the role we play as Australia's LGBTIQA plus education charity.
And I think, Andrew, as you're speaking, I kept thinking, for all the people that sometimes asked me questions, "Oh, why do you want your own little, niche?" And then I had to think carefully, and I
mm,
realized, well, if you're brought up in systems which are all heteronormative and are based on gendered binary
mm,
roles,
mm,
and when you were saying the boundaries, I was thinking also filters for,
yes.
if you're trans and gender diverse, then you're trying to filter that. And one thing I wanted to ask you, and I think a lot of people listening will be
Mm,
wanting to see your view on this, is how does one process or deal their public figure as a leader or emerging
mm,
leader in a particular
mm,
field, and also be comfortable with their identity, whether you're obviously queer identity
mm,
and that
mm, mm,
intersectional, without it being used as a target that we've seen some people in the
yes.
past had
Yes.
experienced.
Well, I think what I found interesting about the program was they did there was no this is the one way to do it, but there were having the benefit of listening to leaders who have been on that journey, and particularly some who are at the top of their game
Mm,
or the top of their field in inverted commas, and listening to them reflect on their style of leadership and their approach to how they let their identity live, I think is something which helps to inform us as to how we are comfortable. I think of another person who was on the program last year who's an executive on the leadership team for a very large company, and who hadn't lent into their leadership as a member of our community, perhaps very strongly, seeing it as almost, well, not relevant because I'm just here to do a good job and in a very senior commercial role. Um, and through the course of the program, I think they had a realization that actually I have a role to play here for our community, and I need to play that role because there are so few visibly out and proud people within our community, and they will still lead in an authentic way. But
mm,
I think the program helped them to realize actually there's a responsibility which comes with my leadership, which I need to create those pathways for future people. And the that sense of responsibility of leadership comes through very, very strongly. But all of the guest presenters, certainly last time around, all had very different reflections and very different approaches, but all of them stand up. And I think that was the thing that, going on the program gives people that confidence to stand up in a way that is appropriate to themselves. And some people will do it in certain ways, and others will do it in very, very different ways. But the program did give a lot of support around different frameworks, and the sort of academic frameworks that underpin leadership as well. Professor Kyrena and Sandra Peter, both who are members of our community, spoke or provided information and challenged the thinking of people in the room to not only learn but to unlearn some of the unhelpful things that we are taught as we go through, that we just presume are the right things but aren't necessarily the right things to be powerful, impactful, strong leaders in whatever field. And I should say as well, there are, and I didn't say before, but the university each year does award a small number of places at a discounted rate for people
mm.
from the community sector. So if there is anyone who is listening who is from the community specific sector, who that level of investment is inaccessible, then there are a limited number of places, which I think come out at around the core price, but they would need to apply obviously, and then the university has the makes that assessment as they go through as to who will be awarded those places.
I will definitely put all the links too,
Mm,
so
yes.
people can look. And one of the areas that I think is important also, and for emerging leaders, and leaders who've been in the field for many years who are now embarking on PhDs in their chosen field. And I was thinking, as you were saying, how important it would be to do this program as you're embarking on this, that you may have got to the level where you are then seen as a knowledge leader in
Yes,
your chosen profession, but then
yes,
having that support in terms of peers who are at that level as well to
exactly.
navigate. So can you tell me a little bit, how important is really establishing networks
Look,
in
I
this
think
space?
it's absolutely critical because and I think you touched on it before, in a gendered culture where, a heteronormative gendered culture where we see there are many, many opportunities for people who are not members of our community to interact, to connect, to foster relationships. Many fewer of those opportunities exist for fewer opportunities for those opportunities exist within our community. So having that opportunity to come together with a group of people who are all striving to be more effective, more authentic senior and executive leaders in their fields is enormously powerful. And certainly the connections from that first cohort, we're still regularly engaged. There are regular sort of connections that are being fostered between people in that group. That group will be invited to the graduation dinner of this subsequent cohort, and then ones that follow. So this community of leaders will continue to build, and that's really what we had wanted. We wanted to create something which both was rigorously academically grounded, that where the learning is, it's not just chats and discussions, but it's actually rigorous, and high quality learning and development, but in a way which is safe and where there is a community that's built. And we see that feeding into this sort of sense that we're growing the capability of our community across the country. And indeed, with this program, we are hoping to see more and more people from the Asia Pacific region coming, particularly from those organisations that may have operations in different countries where it's perhaps more challenging to be open about your identity within our community in those places. And we are hoping that we'll see more of those organisations send people to the program that runs in Sydney, which will run on an annual basis, because it's it's those connections that will be fostered in the confidence in one's own leadership, and that becomes, I guess, more important.
Something that you were speaking, Andrew, I was sort of lighting up inside of me when you were talking about the celebrations and the dinner and the ceremony, because
Yes,
I'm just writing an article at the moment through the sociology of imagination about the importance of the Pride Centre, because I've had a
yes.
lot of debate, contested debates about
Mm,
money and spent. And right, and as I got in and I had like an enlightened thing at midnight thinking,
mm,
oh my God, this
mm,
is why we need it.
mm,
And I'm thinking, when you're speaking about the importance of ceremonies, because for many of us, we achieve an academic and some to
mm,
get out a lovely little piece of paper, but it's more than that. And we're in a room full of people, and sometimes we feel, well, I felt like, oh my God, I'm an openly trans person, but everyone is I'm surrounded
mm,
in a
mm,
heteronormative
mm,
space. And I'm just trying to think, what's it like, Andrew, when you're in a room going to a ceremony and you're with all your
mm,
community?
mm.
What sort of feelings have people said to you or yourself? Have you
Yeah.
reflected on that
Well,
feeling?
look, it was completely uplifting. Cassandra Goldie spoke at the graduation dinner that was held at the Art Gallery of New South Wales for the cohort last year. And and people had come from right across the country to attend the program. And Cassandra spoke, reflected on her own journey as a gay woman in Australia, and the pride which she feels being in those environments where she can see people all having this same goal to make things better, to make things fairer, to give everyone that opportunity to belong and to have a voice. And it was incredibly uplifting. And interestingly, after the event finished, the entire cohort, when I say entire, I mean everybody, went to a bar off Oxford Street where there was 70s music and 80s music and dancing. And I thought, gosh, most of the people were sort of not at the age of going to nightclubs and things. Still, certainly, I'm not at that age. But it was just such an overwhelmingly joyous feeling, and everybody went, and a lot of people just. I think it just was that sense of celebration that we'd gone through something together. That was, well, it was the inaugural program, but also a program which really has given so much. And well, you might feel, I think, in your own ways, I know I do. I often have lots of self-doubt around things, and having the that community of people who were so respectful and gave each other voice was just so powerful. In fact, there was a simulation on the first day that was delivered by Professor Kevin Lowe, and Professor Kevin Lowe, a marvelous, impressive professor of leadership, absolutely inspiring. He ran a simulation, and this I won't share what the simulation was, but basically the results from that, and the same simulation is used with MBA students going through the MBA program. The MBA students, there would be a small number who would score very highly, and the rest would bomb in the simulation. And with the consistently across all the groups that were working on the same simulation in the fellowship, all of the groups performed highly and together as teams. And he was shocked because he said, I think this is something that may have to do with how people in the LGBTQIA plus community are very conscious of what's going on around them and want to make sure that the people around them are feeling comfortable to come on a journey, because you can't, in these exercises, you can't achieve high scores as a group unless you work together. Whereas in our society, we perhaps are more conditioned to, well, I'm on a journey to win, and that means everybody else loses. But that behaviour wasn't evident, and there was no pre-briefing or anything like that. And it gave me that warm feeling inside from very early on in the program that yes, there is something special about us and about our leadership and our potential to really help whatever the organisation become a richer and more powerful organisation in whatever it's doing, because it's including us.
It's a really wonderful a takeaway from the program. And I think you've actually given a lot of insight. When one of the the highlights is to, for people who undertake that program, to then
Yes,
be able to say, well, this is how a professor was able to say, well, I've noticed that the cohort were able to work together, bring people along with them
yes,
to the leadership. And when I
absolutely.
heard that, I thought, wow, this is what I love to hear. And I think
Yes,
a lot of people listening want to hear that
yes.
it's not about selfishness and
Mm,
that drive, but it's about community capacity building in whatever
correct,
ways
correct.
people's journey.
Absolutely. Yes.
And on to that, Andrew, and I know our time is sort of slowly getting more
Mm,
less and less. Those people who want to do the program, but perhaps may have a disability,
yes.
how, how is the adjust? Is it possible to have a physical or other disabilities and adjustments to undertake the program?
Yes, the program is delivered at the University of Sydney Business School's CBD campus, which is in sort of a big tower in Castlereagh Street in Sydney, which is fully accessible. And the each of the different like the dinners and things will be held at environments where accessibility certainly will be accommodated, and facility for quiet rooms, all those sorts of things. Most definitely, if people are, needing specific supports to be able to deliver the program, to participate in the program, then the university will work very hard to achieve them. I think the only comment I would make is I think to get the maximum value out of the project, out of the fellowship, you would really need to attend in person, just because it's that connection and interaction that comes across the course of the week, which I think is just so valuable for the participants.
I think for many of us, who have embraced Zoom, but one of the gaps that I have found in Zoom myself is that interaction that occurs during non-scheduled event where you have that free dialogue with someone and you build
Yeah.
that human connection with another person and you feel that synergy between you and or group of people. Yeah, and I think sometimes that's what I love about that choice, but really having that face to face, I think, is important when you're
Yes.
building connection, leadership skills, and really that. So we've got people, maybe there are people listening right now, Andrew, who think, you know what, I
Mm,
really want to get
mm,
involved. I
mm.
really want to contribute. And I
Yes.
love the idea of mentorship. And I think I want to give, how does someone get involved
Yeah.
how do you put your
Great
hand up
question.
and say,
Yes.
yeah, Andrew, I want to become a mentor for somebody?
Yes. So, so anyone who's interested in mentoring, there is an online application form that sits on the Pinnacle Foundation website. So under the volunteering, get involved, there's the option there to register to become a mentor. And typically, we complete a sort of a form, and then a scholar and mentor manager, who themselves is a Pinnacle alumnus, will then reach out and have some conversation with you. And then from there, each year towards the end of the year is when the vast majority of mentor matches get made, because we have incoming scholars at that time. But then across the course of the year, different people's mentors might be going to live overseas or things change. So sometimes we'll need mentors through the year. We just always let people know that it is based on that very specific match. We try and have someone who's really, as closely as possible, walk the scholar's path. So sometimes if I'll give you the most classic one where we're probably sometimes overweight, is a cisgendered white man in Sydney who's a lawyer. We may have a lot of them who've registered, but the one-eyed underwater basket weaver from remote Western Australia, who needs a mentor who's a one-eyed underwater basket weaver as well, might be slightly more challenging to identify. So it's finding those very specific matches that becomes the thing that we focus on the most. If people want to get involved other than that, we also have our state and territory committees across every state in the ACT. And they typically meet on a monthly basis, and they get involved, get a subset of that committee in that location get involved in selection of scholars. Others get involved in engaging and making sure the scholars and the alumni in that location are supported. Others get involved in arranging events or pride activations. We march in all the different pride marches and things like that, or involved in fundraising. So there's a whole array of different things. And then lastly, and I can't not say it, is we don't receive any government funding. We are a heavy user of funds, in the sense that we're awarding funds to over 100 scholars each year to study. So we're always on the lookout for donors who support us. We have DGR1 status, so donations $2 and over a tax deductible, and people can donate on our website or set up a regular giving program on our website. So there are lots of ways, and maybe just one other that I think, particularly for people who are at, at sort of mine and maybe yours, into the spectrum, where we're starting to think about what we do with our assets when we pass away.
Absolutely.
Our bequest program, I think, is something that many people are interested in, because, particularly in my case, having children was not something that even entered my head as a young person. And I think for many people, certainly my year and up,
Mm.
I think that's the case. And so, we there are great opportunities for people to make a lasting legacy and support future young people.
I think that's a wonderful way, and I was thinking that too. So, for some of us who never had opportunities, we never thought, in the 80s and 90s, to be married or have children.
Yeah,
And it's a way that we can give to the community and know that the work that we've done can lead to perhaps the next generation, supporting them in to achieve their goals, and
yeah,
maybe from that, the legacy lives through that.
yes.
Andrew, it's been a wonderful journey hearing about the important work of the Pinnacle Foundation, and we look forward to having more conversations about, how the different types of experts that are developing in the new knowledges that we are creating with our future leaders. Thank you so much. And we've put all the links for everybody. And again, if you are somebody at a university and perhaps maybe inviting someone from like Andrew to the Pinnacle Foundation to, to talk to your students and staff about, how you can support the Pinnacle Foundation, I think it's an important conversation to have and to really embrace inclusivity and diversity in a very meaningful way. Thank you so much, Andrew, for
Thank
spending
you.
some time with us at the Sociology of Media Voices series.
Wonderful. Thank you.